it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our show.
We are back. The team is back. And
Yes.
today we are excited to have another fabulous guest with us, Jeremy. And before we get to hear what Jeremy had to share, I'm going to introduce myself very quickly. I'm Sarah M. I'm the co-host, and I grew up in Cambodia. I gone through a very dark time when Cambodia went through a very difficult situation when the communist Khmer Rouge took over our country. They basically destroyed our life, destroyed our country, and by God's grace, I am alive. So, what I can tell you is this: it must be a miracle. It is. But I'm grateful that I'm still alive and was able to escape the captivity and also escape the country. And about a year of a journey crossing the border and find my way to United States, I end up in Connecticut, and my life start all over again in Connecticut since 1981. So I've been here 40 years. I feel like an old person.
But you look 22.
Thank you, Jeremy. All right. So I'm able to publish my book, and it's available on my website. I'll just show you quickly. This is how my book looked like, how I survived the killing fields. It's available on my website, sarahim.com. And I'm also go out in the community, speaking, sharing the inspiration and encouragement so that people can be inspired, be confident, and be courageous again. Back to you, Lee.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Was a great introduction. So this month, we're still talking about risk taking and what would you do if your life is just one safe space and you don't take risk. So the risk Sarah does was escape out of her country in Cambodia. And same thing, my family took that risk, knowing that we might not make it, at the time, because going out to the ocean, escaping the communists from Vietnam is a huge risk taking. But because we see the promise, we see that something that will benefit us a lifelong. So we took that risk. And that's why we're talking about this month about, why people should take risk, not reckless kind of risk, but just the risk that to improve you, to make you better. So my family escaped out of Vietnam and we made it. To get the story really short, you can go into my website, leatran.com. You'll find a TEDx talk there. My book about my memoir is also there if you're intend to want to read it and see what kind of risks that we have endured and we were willing to take to get to a place where we find thriving for year on end to the next generation. And because of that, Sarah and I also dedicate this platform to help refugees who want to look for that risk to have a better future. And those are the refugee that from Malaysia. There's still 150,000 people get trapped in Malaysia in the refugee status for some time, even a decade. And we would love to have you support them. If you could donate to them, and their website is www.refugee.com, refugeefilmschool.com. I'm sorry. So there's a donation there. If you can spare a few bucks, that would be great. If you can do more, that's even better. But today we have a really special guest who took the risk who took the risk of getting out of whatever that brought him down to be a better person, to be a place that where he even helping other people to thrive. So his name is Jeremy Tishler. And welcome, Jeremy. And thank you for being on our platform and share your story.
Thank you.
So Jeremy, tell us a little bit. Maybe Sarah can introduce your profile, your bio, and then you can tell us more in detail about what you were fighting for and what kind of risks that you were willing to take to get here.
Okay. Yes, I will introduce you to my inspirational friend here. He had been he gone through drug and alcohol addiction, and he was almost 300 pounds weight. But he got closer to that. But by random check up with the doctor, he sent him to a dietitian where he got down to 144 pounds. Still sober to this day, 13 years later. Now a certified dietary manager, personal trainer, health coach, youth fitness and nutrition specialist, experience and education together. So today he's going to talk with us and share about sobriety is possible, talk about health is possible, talking about there is a better life, and talking about life is not easy despite sobriety recovery, change and grow as a person. So welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you. I'm now even more nervous.
So tell us a little bit about your journey. I know that's a big summary, but how did you get into the ruts before you be able to get out of it? And I'm sure that it's just not that easy, just going to a dietitian and then you just like, okay, I'm gonna just quit. And no, it is a fighting journey. So tell us, bring us back to that moment.
I was always a very uncomfortable person in my own skin as a kid. I'm still a very uncomfortable person. And my parents, and I didn't know this until I was an adult. I didn't realize it. They thought that something was wrong growing up. Didn't realize it until I was about 17 years old. But the thing really started to come out when I was 16 years old. And I went away for a summer in between school years. And I came back and I had a very small group of friends. I was, like I said, I couldn't really talk to anybody or do anything. And when I came back, they said, "What did you do?" They saw something bad. They said, "Something happened." And before I know it, at 16 years old, fake IDs, trying to get beer and cigar. And they're like, "Oh, yeah. It was, I tried something, an illegal substance for the first time." And it totally, they saw it right away that it was going to be a problem. I was the last to know. So that was between my junior and senior year of high school. And, and that I looking at colleges, got accepted to every college I applied to, graduated near the top of my class. But even kids in school, they're like, something is different and this is not good. And a couple of months later, I'm like, all right, well, I tried something illegal. At least alcohol will be legal in a few years. Let me, and I go out, won't say with who in case they ever see this. I don't want them to feel responsible or remember it. But some people from they were now freshmen in college, and I was a senior in high school. They'd gone to the same school, and they took me out for my 17th birthday and got drunk, and it was instant. And the way I describe it is, when a child is born and they start breathing, they're going to breathe for the rest of their life. And now there was something in me that I was going to be drinking for the rest of my life. It was instant. And, when I share something, I think it's fairly common knowledge now. It's under the rug in my family. But my birthday is the beginning of December, so they took me out at the beginning of December, that following weekend after my birthday. And I would been discussing with my parents about drinking and driving, get my driver's license. And one of the things that came up was drinking and driving, not to do it. And I believed that I would never do it. But I got drunk, and New Year's Eve, a month after my birthday, I'm drinking and driving. And everything, it just, fairly uneventful rest of the school year. But when I went away to college 9 months later, that's when my parents they saw something different in me that was not good. It was depression. After first week of college, I called my parents hysterical crying. There was this thought that I didn't deserve to be alive. And got into a lot of trouble with the school. There was police involvement. I went from I graduated at the top of my class, not a single problem, to there was police involvement, which my parents now know about. Police involvement, a whole big mess. And by the end of the school year, I'd been thrown out of school. What was really weird is I convinced my parents to let me drop out. They were saying, "Too bad, you gotta deal with it," not fully understanding what was going on. And I didn't tell them about the police problems. And this is how quickly I went down. Like within a year or two of trying substances, this is where I was. And came home and went to a community college, started getting terrible anxiety attacks. I remember walking out of class one day, it was calculus, calling my mother hysterical, crying, "I don't know what this is." And there was some talk about if I was doing substances, and I lied but slipped during the conversation. So she knew I was doing these things that I should not have been doing because of the slip. And she said, "You want to get help?" And I said, "No, I got this." But look, I'm sitting here hysterical crying and saying, no, it'll be all right, which doesn't make sense. And meanwhile, I don't think I had been ready to go away to college. But my parents had forced me to finish in 4 years, and I did somehow. I don't know how. Because it was just the problem was, it's not that the partying was not a problem, but that was the second problem. The first problem is that I was so unhappy. I was so miserable with this depression. And I try to say this vaguely, is that I didn't want to live anymore. And I tried. I tried to make that happen more than once. And I lived through it every single time. And I was looking to end the depression. And kept coming out, and somehow graduated in 4 years. And my parents, I don't want to say it was an argument, I don't think that, but there were discussions. There were definitely some mildly intense discussions. My major was psychology. And they're like, "Jeremy, we know you're not going to grad school, but really what I was looking for was an end to my misery, so I picked psychology. I was depressed with all the stuff I just said. I was looking for an end to my misery. I was trying to learn how to not be miserable anymore, and how to not have those feelings of ending my life." And my parents said, "But you have to do something after college too." And I didn't get it. I was stuck in the party. I was stuck in just get me out of my misery. And when I came home, there could have been a very good job. A friend of my father's gave me a job in New York City. I was actually supposed to I'm telling you now, I was not affected in any way, but I was supposed to start work in the trade center the following week. September 11th was a Tuesday. My first day was supposed to be Monday, 6 days later. But again, I'm not claiming that I was not. There were plenty of people who were horribly affected. And a friend of my father's set me up with a job at one of the exchanges, and I blew it. And they were saying, you could have had this job, this thing that led, but I was too busy. I was not ready to go into the workforce. I think that's what it was. I was still stuck in college, going to bed at 5 a.m. every day, and I blew it and continued partying. That was the big issue of the next year or two, that I blew this job. But 2003, I think it was the end of 2003, my friends had started talking that I started to lose everybody. They were all walking away, seeing how I couldn't stop. And by chance, like, I won't ever call out of work, ever. I'm very responsible like that. I will go if I'm dying. And I don't call out sick, nothing. I'll always go to work. And there was a point at the end of 2003 that I started complaining to my parents that something's not right. I didn't know what it was. And they started saying, like, one of these days I'm going to call out. And one Sunday night, I was still living with my parents, and I said, I think tomorrow's the day I'm going to call out something. I'm really got to get to a doctor. And the next morning, from what the stories that have been told to me, what I pieced together is that I came back to consciousness 3 weeks later. The next morning, my mother found me unconscious on the floor bleeding. And she calls an ambulance, 105 fever. And they say my heart stopped in the ambulance. Turns out it was food poisoning. It was food poisoning.
Okay.
And my friends had started to talk. Oh, he overdosed. He did this. He tried to end his life again. And they started to back off. And I was starting to feel more and more uncomfortable around them. And that's not what it was. I was genuinely sick. But this is where the bottom hit, where drinking and doing other things 7 days a week, from morning till night, couldn't get a job. I did have a couple of jobs that lasted, surprisingly. And then the bottom hit. It was pretty uneventful. But I had nobody left. I had alienated everybody. I was contemplating suicide again. I had already tried it more than once, and nothing eventful. But in 2007, the bottom was there, and I had moved from the street I grew up on, because my parents got divorced, to an area, well, it must have been 6-7 miles away, not far, still in the same area. And I wound up sending a text to one of the guys I grew up with. I knew he was getting married, and send him a text, I'll help plan the bachelor party, and you'll need my address in Long Beach. He goes, no, I don't need your address. I don't need the help with the bachelor party. And I'm like, what's going on? He goes, no, I got married already. Have a nice life. And that was to find out that he had a party at his house, and I was mixing things and got violent and beat somebody up and didn't remember doing it, which is not normally the way I am. And this is what drugs and alcohol did. And it sent somebody to the hospital, and no one wanted me. That was secure at the end. And I was so isolated and so uncomfortable that I got thrown out of everywhere. This was the last thing I had. I did start to lose jobs and people and colleges, and parents didn't want anything to do with me anymore. And I was hysterical crying. I'm like, I have nothing left. And I was contemplating that thought again. But in 2008, I go to the doctor, random checkup. And he says, no, I'm getting that confused. But he had said, they said, normally the doctors, okay, if everything's fine, you go, you got your blood, everything's fine. But they said, I need you to come back. I'm like, something is wrong. And he says, I was 28. He says, you're not going to live to see 30. And I said, all good. I wasn't planning on seeing it anyway. Was not planning. And he goes, does that mean what I think it means? I said, yes. I was looking at weapons too. Said, my doc, I only have to use it once. And my parents don't know this. They don't, if they see this, this will be the first time they hear it. I said, well, I only have to use it once. I was considering it. I told him I already bought it, which I didn't, but I was considering it. He says, what is that? What has to happen to make that not happen? Is there anything you want in your life before that happens? And I'm hysterical crying. And I said, actually, yes. There is one thing. I can't do this to my family. I can't go out like such an embarrassment. I want to at least say I tried. I got to do something. There's got to be one, like something that, and he says, what's bothering you? And I went into my physical health that I was almost 300 pounds. He knew it, and he listed you have liver failure because of the party, kidney failure, diabetes, this, that, the weight. And he says, well, if you don't stop, you're going to not see 30 no matter what. So you're not seeing 30, you might want to get your affairs in order. But hearing that versus me saying it to myself was a different story. And I said, I want to, I can't look like this when I go. I don't want my parents to see me like this. And he says, that's it. That's the answer. Do you know what a nutritionist is? I said, no, I've never heard of it. He explained it to help you lose weight. You'll exercise and this and that. And I went, and he sent a copy of my blood test results, whatever, to the nutritionist, and he sits there and he's reading. I'm like, oh my God, this is awful. And he says, do you think you could put the substances down? I said, honestly, no. No, I don't think I can. And he said, but he went into, your doctor says this is like your hope and you want to try it. I said, he goes, do you think you could do it for that? I said, still no, but I will try. And I'm like, it's not going to be long. I'm not going to be able to last very long. And it's like I said, you're born, you're breathing, like I needed it for the rest of my life. It was like telling me to give up oxygen. And I'm sure many other addicts feel that way too. I'm like, no, I don't see it happening, but I'll try. And every week when I went back, and before I knew it, I'm like, okay, I'm getting close to 200 pounds. And I wanted to be, okay, if I get to one something. And he says, what is your goal? I wanted to be 170 pounds because that's what I weighed the day I graduated high school. And before I know it, it's 6 months with no substances. And then I lost my job. They were doing I was a mess. I really should have been fired. But through some bad behavior on their part, I got lucky. Bad decision to take the layoff, but it was basically they did a big mistake that I had them on. They wouldn't fire me. Did a layoff, and I'm like, all right, I'm done. Now I'm unemployed too. It had going for me the weight loss in my pants. I needed all these new clothes, and I was getting happy, but then I had nobody left and no job. And my parents, my family didn't want, of course they were talking to me, but it was very strained. And what was weird was I don't mind outing myself. But in the time of seeing the doctor, the nutritionist, my own thought, and my mother, they all suggested I go into recovery. But I remember talking to my mother about it, and before my parents said anything, and I'm like, there is something really weird going on. I'm thinking about going into recovery. Then the doctor told me to go into recovery. Then the dietitian told me, oh no, what happened was, I'm sorry, I'm saying this wrong. I said, you wouldn't believe the conversation I just had with the doctor. She goes, oh, tell me, he's telling you to go into recovery. I'm like, what the hell was that? She goes, what, did I get it right? I said, actually, you did. I'm like, so I'm thinking about it, you're thinking about it, the doctor's telling me about it, and the dietitian is telling me about it. That is not a coincidence. And later they talk of me in recovery a lot. It's all about God and this and that, and people call it a God moment. And I'm like, that was really weird that we all, I'm like, I know they're not conspiring against me to do this. Like, plus I had the thought of my own. So like, this is really weird. And I just lost my job, so uncomfortable around people. And I started going to recovery, and there were some people that took me in, and I don't talk to all of them anymore. I don't talk to most of them anymore, but there were some falling outs, and some people did whatever. But some people at the beginning, I needed them. Whether we talk anymore or not is not the issue. I needed them. They were pulling me from drowning in the ocean into the boat. We're no longer in the same boat anymore, but that's what it was. I needed those people to, whether I knew it or not, to pull me into the boat. They randomly showed up just as I'm drowning, and there is another God moment. And it was a process, had to do it. And I talk about the you guys might laugh at this, but there is a whole big God thing in recovery, and I had such a hard time with it. I don't struggle with the concept anymore, but doing the right thing is another story. And I went with Seinfeld. There was an episode of Seinfeld where George Costanza, he has this realization. He says, if everything I've ever done has been wrong, by default, the opposite has to be right. Instead of a tuna on rye, I'm going to get chicken salad on whole wheat. And I'm now not going to vote for the Mets. I'm going to vote for the Yankees. And he says, and he has this funny thing. He says, George, if you remember George Costanza, he's a little short, he's a little chubby, and he's bald.
Yes.
And he says, you see that woman over there that's 20 years younger than me? He goes, I'm going to go, instead of pulling out some one-liner, I'm going to go tell her the truth. And it worked. He goes up to her, he goes, hi, my name is George. I'm bald, I'm unemployed, and I live with my parents. And she was,
I remember that episode. Yes.
And it worked. He told the truth, and it works. And that was the moment. If everything I've ever done has been wrong, by default, the opposite has to be right. Look where I am. It has to be right. And that's what I went with. And it still works. And it was tough. But basically what happened was that things started to come back. I was still very socially awkward. Don't get me wrong. But about 2 years into being sober, I had always felt I still feel lost to this day. I still talk to my parents about it. So I always felt very lost, clueless, directionless. And I'd always been looking for what was my calling in life. And I must have spoken to my parents about it, especially my mother. But she came with me to the dietitian a couple of times, and saying that really clicked. It with that dietitian, how I got it in one shot, because my doctor told the guy that I would be his single most difficult patient. And because I was my doctor's single most difficult patient. But when I get to the dietitian said he was my single best, he was the poster child. And my doctor would joke about it. He goes, what do you do? You give him you're his poster, and you make me want to quit medicine. Like, and you would joke. I have that sense of humor. I didn't mind. And, but, and talking to my parents, I'm like, I feel directionless. You remember I said a time or two, I should go back to school. I should go do something real. I'm like, what would you thought if I went back to school to be a nutritionist? I don't remember my father, but my mother was very supportive. And I don't remember what my sister thought either. But I can imagine she was supportive. And when I went back at 2 years sober, I knew it wouldn't happen right away. It would take 6 months to a year. A year later, I'm in school, and it was tough. And one of the things that I learned over the years, especially because at school, and even now, I went back to school. I can't believe it was 10 years ago. It was 2011. Um, it's. I don't always believe this, but it's true. Sometimes I get crushed by failure. I am like devastated by it at times, but it was better to try and fail than not try. My parents will tell you I still struggle with that, but it's true. Because when I fail at something, I usually get upset, very upset. But I'm like, you know what? At least, my thing was one semester at a time. I'll give it a shot. If it doesn't work, But at the end of the first semester, I'm looking at my grades. I'm like, it was a blip, and my mother will remember this. But I'm looking at the end of the first semester. I'm like, this is actually going pretty well. Let me go another semester. Second semester, you know what? It's going even better. I'll give it another semester. I was in for 5 years. And, but during that first semester, I started getting the anxiety attacks again and migraines. And my mother noticed it was around tests and being judged. And I still have it. But to go, the thing that I say now, I'm not without the whole experience of school is that education aside, doesn't matter what I studied. I could have studied medicine or learning how to push a broom. It was about the experience of it and changing as a person. And how that process to this day, and I'm still not perfect and I never will be, but to this day to push me like to keep having the experience. Of course, I'd rather it work, but how to study and be responsible and juggle all the balls in the air with working full-time, internship, studying. And there was times that it was brutal. There was one semester, my mother will remember, the anxiety attacks were terrible. And I was going with, and I know, well, with some of the religious ideas, when you're closer to your goal, that's when it gets hardest. That's when somebody's pushing at your door trying to push you back. And there were plenty of times like that. And I knew I did have to, there was a change of course. It did become a little too much. But how it changed me as a person, and how I have to keep changing. But part of the process, even before school, was part of that process is amends and making things right. And I went to the people that I hurt the worst. I was uncomfortable getting my family right away, so we'll exclude family. But after that, the people I hurt the worst, it was one guy, I got violent. There was another guy that almost got legal. He wanted to, I don't want to go into it on here, but police almost got involved. Actually, I think they did get involved. And those were the people that I went to work first because they'd be the hardest. I didn't want to try and make excuses to get out of dealing with the problems of my past. So I'm like, well, if I do the hardest ones get out of the way, it only gets easier. I'm walking downhill. And what wound up happening is I didn't have the kid I grew up with. I didn't have his phone number, but I remembered the phone number of where he grew up. And I called their house, discussed this with the sponsor, and I called their house. And I knew that voice. I knew his mother's voice right away. And I'm like, "Oi, hang up the phone. And I didn't. And I said, "Is this Miss last name?" She says, "Yes, it is. Who's this?" I said, "This is Jeremy Tishler. My friend's name's friend. This is his friend. Been cool. I'd like to talk. I owe you guys an apology for what I did to you years ago. And I have to make it right." And we had this long talk, and she goes, "You know, we were praying for you to get sober." And she goes, "Are you doing this because you're getting sober?" I said, I'm like, "Well, actually, yeah." She goes, "You know, we've been praying for you for years to get sober." She goes, let me ask you a question. Is this part of the amends process? I said, you're number one. You're the first one. She goes, you're kidding. And I'm like, no, I'm doing the hardest ones first. And she goes, well, listen, we had this long conversation. She goes, well, he may never want to talk to you. I said, can I have his phone number? And they said, he may never want to talk to you again. Why don't we take your phone number? We'll pass the message along. If he wants to call you, he'll call. I'm like, you know what? That's actually a great idea. That's the right answer. And we hang up the phone. 2 seconds later, the phone rings from a phone number I don't know. It's him. He goes, you just call my mother. He says, it's name. You just call my mother? I said, yep. He goes, he says, is it true? I said, yeah, it's true. He goes, we saw that you went down this bad road. I am skipping steps in the process, by the way, but do you remember us telling you were getting into trouble? I said, yes, I do. And we had this long conversation, and then the third guy, and we wound up, the three of us are talking, and they said, listen, why don't we meet for lunch one day? I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. They said, come with us for lunch. We'll meet you. I lived in a beach town on Long Island. My apartment was overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, and why don't we come? It's getting nice. It's getting warm. I was like April, May. And I said, guys, the check comes. And I said, and I pulled out my credit card, and they said, nope, we got it. And one guy eventually did not take me back. But the one guy where I spoke to his parents, but part of again, I did skip a step, but, when time came, I was going back to school, I needed internships, and my friend turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. And we've discussed that if the situation was reversed, if he did to me what I did to him, he would have been 6 feet under. I never would have let him get away with it. I'm like, why would you do this? He was getting me internships and scholarships and this, and I'm like, I don't get it. What is making you do this? Like, you would have been out of my life if the situation was reversed. But this is what happened, and people started to come back, and most of my friends now are still from being sober. They're not from growing up, but these things started to happen, and what ended up happening was, while I was in school, 2 years in, I go to the doctor for a checkup, and he says, how do you feel? And I said, besides the fact that I'm exhausted, I'm fine. He says, define exhausted. Like, I don't know, 2 or 3 coffees and 2 or 3 Red Bulls every day. He says, every day? I'm like, it's not always 3 and 3. It's usually 2 and 2. He goes, no, something is wrong. This was the moment that had me realize there is something better than me out there. I'm alive for a reason. Was a month later, I think it was about 3.5 weeks later, I'm in the hospital having open heart surgery at 32 years old for congestive heart failure. And I asked the doctor, I said something, and this is fairly kind, not that we talk about it, but I think it's known in my family. I said to the surgeon, I said, do me a favor, put me out of my misery. The heart surgery, it's a good way to go. I'm miserable. Put me out of my misery. Phil, I will sign whatever you want. No one's watching. I will sign any legal document, get a lawyer in here. If you screw it up, way to go. Thank you. And what wound up happening is I woke up a little too soon after the surgery. The surgery was over, thankfully. But the machines were breathing for me, and they had to put me back out. And when I woke up, I realized I was alive for a reason. I was alive for, I was spared. And then
you certainly alive for a reason, more than one reason. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for being vulnerable in front of us, in front of our audience, in our platform, and tell your life story, which is very, very rough. I am sure that there's a lot of things. I know that we are like in 40 minutes mark, but there's so many things I want to talk to you about. I want to ask you about, but we're going to take a few minutes because we want to respect our audience too, because usually we end around 40 minutes. But I want you to know that you have come such a long way and you have made it here. And now you are a coach, you're a dietitian, you're helping other people. And the best thing is you tell the truth about your life. And I think, you know, coming back to your life story, I believe that maybe the drug, the alcohol was kind of like a place for you to numb and to not facing the reality. And maybe the people you hang around with was a wrong crowd that it just keep pulling you down.
Wasn't them.
No. Okay. So, but you keep finding to go back to a place that where you can hide out and you can just stay away from the real life. But there's so much going on, meanings that you're fighting every step of the way, even though there's a few times that you are tempted to take your own life. And I think that God keeps sending angel for a reason to intersect with your life, to be there at the moment that you need it. And I'm so grateful for you speaking out, because many people probably in your shoes and need to hear this, and they will see hope. They will see you have graduated college and, you know, get your life back together and have lost all the dangers of having obesity and all type of sickness and disease. So you are alive for a reason, for more than one reason. And I want to say that thank you so much for sharing with us for all the journey. It was a really rough journey, and I know it is not easy every day. I mean, for normal people like us, still fighting, let alone for people who has been through a rough patch and trying to get back up. But you are doing it for 13 years and still continue to do it. And your story is very inspiring, and I want to thank you for that.
Well, we ended on a good note. I'm alive for a reason, and then you.
Well, I'm sure you're alive for many good reasons. If there's one thing you can tell our audience about how can you keep strong every day, what make you stay getting up and not laying down when you are down there, what is that one thing people can do to stay up?
Well, it's weird. You just said something. I already lost what it was, but just made me think of something I saw online. I don't know how many years ago. Hope. There was a picture. It said hope, and it was like against it was not like a real picture. It was obviously like photoshopped or whatever it was, but you could see the sunlight against like a pink background, and it said it said H, there was a dot, an O dot P dot E. It was hope. Hold on, pain ends. And I still remember, I must have seen that 8-9 years ago, 10 years ago, and it still sticks with me. And especially because I just had a second heart surgery in middle of September. I just had another one. Mm-hmm. And something that I remembered more from the first heart surgery was that the pain is temporary. Like, and I say that more about physical pain than mental pain, because, you know, there was I remember being a tiny bit concerned when I'm like, oh, I just had a heart surgery and there's painkillers. That could be, you know, there's a little red flag there. We did discuss that with somebody, but knowing that the pain of that surgery passed. I've had 3 surgeries in the last 13 years while being sober. 2 of them were hernias in my groin, and actually, no, 4 surgeries. Now there's a 4th one because one just happened a month ago. There was 2 hernias and 2 for heart failure. And the second one was just a month ago for the heart failure. And even now, it's there are times, and my family will identify with this because they're still going through it, still in not as much, but unless it's actually noticeably less. But to say, okay, like this will, it'll go. But in another sense, I find it hard to really believe that sometimes with a depression, because when you're in a depression and you're having that thought, it's like the end of the world.
Did you ever considering taking medicine for depression?
Yes, I do. I do take it.
Okay. Because many of us have chemical imbalance in our brain, and it's not like, a person's fault, because when you have chemical, it's just like anything, if your chemical is imbalanced, you need something to make it, to calibrate it.
Yeah.
So sometimes the bipolar, the depression, those are things that definitely need to see a therapist and see a psychiatrist or some specialists about that. But and that could be very much a cause for you to keep finding the things that just kind of keep you forgetting where you are. But yeah, one thing if you can advise people if they are in your shoes, hope is a great thing. And I love the analogy, but I also want to add to hope. I have read somewhere it's a help one person every day.
Yeah.
So that's what that hope stands for. So you see hope as what you see, but now you are helping one person every day. So that is a great way to saying that your life get a purpose and you get out of that risk, because now you can help people go into a safe place when they are in the same risk that you were many years ago.
Well, that's a reason I do what I do, because part of being sober is, and there will people who will disagree. Actually, I would think most people in recovery would disagree with me, but part of that process is pay it forward. Now you help another person, you sponsor somebody else.
Yes.
And I have never had it in me to do that, not ever. I don't know why. But what hit was, and I say it to myself harsher. I'm going to say it kindly on here, but in certain meetings, they say this is how they say it, is in the therapeutic value of one addict helping another is without parallel. Now, the kind way I say it, I say it very harshly to myself, but the therapeutic value of one person with weight struggles helping another person with weight struggles is without parallel. So that's how there is a little bit of a selfish reason I went back to school, because I was looking, I need a career and I need to make money. But, I want to be happy with what I do. So, but there is the selfish aspect of it, but that's how I see it, because, and even if I go on job interviews or if I'm looking for work, I'm like, it's not just that I went to school for it. I already had the bachelor's degree from years earlier, but then there was another 5 years of school. And I'm like, it's not just about the head knowledge. I've been through it. It's, somebody picked me up from drowning out of the water. I know how to help you
Yeah.
Just want to
Well,
let
nobody
them out of the
better
way.
than you. You understand. You've walked in their shoes, so you have total knowledge of what it feel like. And I think that's the best thing people do is people doing help the person that they were before.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's what Sarah and I do. We're trying to help the people that we were once. Lack of self-confidence, lots of afraid of speaking in front of public and all kind of things. So we want to be there because we have been in that shoes, and that's what you are doing. But anyway, I really appreciate you, and I know that we went way over time. Sorry if you are staying around with us. This is a very, very heavy topic, and I'm glad that we get to the end, that we can see the light of the tunnel and see Jeremy is doing well and helping others, and his life is prospered. So please share if you know somebody who's in that rut, if you know somebody who needs help, if you know somebody who's in that shoes that trying to get out, but have a hard time doing it. Please reach out to Jeremy. Please reach out to therapists, to some specialists, anybody that you can get a hold of to help that person, because every life is precious. Every life is worth to be living, and we all have purpose, and God do have purpose for us. So thank you again, Jeremy. And I want to say you are awesome. Okay, you are appreciated, and I hope everybody share this episode. It's a little long, but thank you so much, and have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Jeremy.
Thank you, Sarah and Leah.